Hello. In this session, we will look at an introduction to IAM policies. Now, at a high level, IAM policies are nothing but your permissions. So, whenever we create our users, we define the permissions for the users. Now, we can define the permissions at the user level as well as at the group level. Now, this permission basically defines the access as to the users when they log into the AWS account, what all the resources and what all the services the users can access within the same AWS account. So in the last session, we looked at how you can create your groups and how you can attach the permissions for the group, and then how you can add the users to those groups to basically manage the permissions. Now these permissions are nothing but your policy. So in this session, we will look at an introduction. We'll talk a bit more on your policies and we'll understand a bit more on the IAM policies. Once again, before we start off with this session, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. So let's get started with this. So whenever we talk about managing the access to the users, we make use of your policies, which are nothing but your permissions, and then we attach these policies to your IAM identities, which can be your users, your groups, or your roles. All right. So these policies will basically define the permissions for the respective IAM resources. So your policy is nothing but it's an object in AWS that when you attach it to a resource, like let's say IAM user or to a group of user, it simply defines the permissions for the user. For example, let's say S3 access, EC2 access, IAM access, VPC access, and then so on. So it simply defines the permissions for the resources. So whenever we attach these policies to the users and when the users try accessing the resources, AWS will evaluate these policies whenever your user or a role makes a request to access the services or the resources within the AWS account. Now, permissions or your policies, okay, basically this determine whether the request is allowed or denied. So if you're getting a permission denied or you don't have access, that means the respective policies are not attached to you, and that's why you're getting that authentication error. Now most of these policies in the backend, they are stored as JSON documents. So AWS store these documents in the form of JSON. All right. Now whenever we talk about your policies, they can be divided into 6 types. So we have the identity based policies, we have resource based policies, we have permission boundaries, we have organization SCPs, we have ACLs, and then finally we have your session policies. Now here we will be talking about your identity based policies. All right, what it is and how it works. So identity based policies are, again, these are your JSON policy documents, and this basically controls the actions. So whenever a user or a group of users or a role, whenever they try accessing the resources on the AWS account, what actions they can take and what actions they cannot take, that will be controlled by your identity based policies. Now these identity based policies can be further categorized into 2 types. You have the managed policies and then you have the inline policies. All right, so whenever we talk about your identity based policies, we have 2 types. We have the managed policies and then we have the inline policies. So let's talk a bit more on this. So first we'll talk about your managed policies. So these managed policies are your standalone identity based policies, and these policies can be attached to multiple users, multiple groups, and multiple roles in your AWS account. So these managed policies, it follows your one-to-many mapping, meaning one policy can be attached to any number of resources. So we can attach this policy to multiple users, multiple groups, and also multiple roles. Now again, when we talk about your managed policies, they can be divided into 2 types. We have the AWS managed policies. So AWS managed policies are the policies that are created and managed by AWS. So any policies that are created and managed by AWS are your AWS managed policies. So here, if you see this icon or this logo with your policies, that means it's your AWS managed policies. And here also you can see the type, it says AWS. That means this policy is created and managed by AWS. And then we have your customer managed policies. Now any policies that we will create and we will be managing, those policies are called as your customer managed policies. So customer managed policies provide you with more precise control over the policies that are managed by AWS. So, most of the time you will see that your AWS managed policies gives you more permissions, and you might have a requirement for very granular permissions. Then you can make use of your customer managed policies to create a very precise policy that will give very restricted access to the resources and services in AWS. And then you have your inline policies. So inline policies are the policies that we add directly to a single user, group, or a role. So your inline policies can be attached to only one user, or to only one group, or to only one role. Unlike your managed policies, your inline policies cannot be attached to multiple resources. So we cannot attach this to multiple users, or multiple groups, or multiple roles. So inline policies, it maintains a very strict one-to-one relationship between a policy and an identity. So we can attach it to only one user. So it has this one-to-one restriction. We cannot attach this to multiple resources. Now these inline policies also gets deleted when we delete the identity. So let's say my inline policy is attached to a user, and if I delete the user, the inline policy also gets deleted. Your managed policy does not have such behavior. Even if you delete the user or the group or the role, the managed policies are not affected, whereas your inline policies will be affected if you delete the identity. Like in this case, if you delete the user, the policy also gets deleted. Now you can create a policy when you create the identity or later. So these inline policies can be created whenever you want. You can either create them when you are creating the identity, like your user, group, or role, or you can create it at a later point also, and you can attach it to your identity as well. So this is an introduction to your IAM policy. So once again, IAM policies are nothing but these are your permissions. All right. So this basically defines what actions the resources can take when they log into the AWS account. That's all for this session. Thank you. Once again, before you leave, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you like the video, leave a like and please share the video.